Well, hello, and welcome to the Fisher Poetry Podcast, a showcase of prose, poetry, and song written and performed by those in the commercial fishing community. Mostly. I'm your host, Brad. Thanks for joining us today. Today's episode is from the 2024 FisherPoets Gathering in Astoria, Oregon. The location and performers in this episode, as well as links to home pages of both the archive and gathering, are included in the episode description. So, without further ado, here's the show.
In the middle of the 8 o'clock hour here, or winding down the 8 o'clock hour, our third reader this hour is Annie Howell-Adams. She's hailing from San Juan Island up in Washington. There's another place I love. I spend quite a bit of time there in the spring and the fall. She fished for 12 years, trolling in Southeast Alaska, starting with a 13-foot open skiff, hand trolling, owner-operator of the fishing vessel Marvel. 13-foot open skiff, that's pretty gutsy fishing right there. All right, well, let's welcome Annie to the stage. Whoa.
I've got two pieces I want to just give me some good sound right on my... All right, testing. How's that sound, everybody? Sounding good? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Right, there we go. Boom. All righty. All right. Let's see. I got to be able to read my notes. I'm going to take you on board my fishing vessel, the fishing vessel Marvel. It was a 34-foot wooden troller built in 1924 in Coos Bay, Oregon. I bought it in Olympia and took it up to Sitka, Alaska. And I'm going to read a little bit of prose, a story about my first day at Cape Edgecombe on my own boat, the Marvel. Okay, the crest of the wave. Opening day of the summer salmon season, I was 24 years old and a bad combination of inexperience, naivete, and fearlessness. The Pacific Ocean wasn't a lake in Minnesota. It wasn't even the serene waters that glisten peacefully around my home on San Juan Island. If I didn't pay attention, the Pacific Ocean was out to kill me. The granite sky closed in like my exhaustion. I pulled 4 lines of trolling gear on board. Looking across the big seas, I wondered which direction offered better shelter for the night. From Cape Edgecombe at the northern tip of Sitka Sound, 2 possibilities emerged. One behind an exposed volcanic island, St. Lazaria Island. The other, Gilmer Bay, a protected bay 45 minutes run to the north. The bay seemed safer, but I didn't really know. What did I know on opening day of the salmon season with my own boat, Marvel? Very little. I unrolled the paper chart of Sitka Sound and calculated the distances to both anchorages. Lumpy southwest swells broke on our stern, pushing Marvel along. Between the lack of sleep getting ready for opening day, seasickness, and being tossed around in the cockpit, I was more than ready to take a break from the intensity of fishing in big ocean swells, waves the size of city buses. Since untying from the Sitka dock early that morning, in what seemed like days ago, I hadn't developed a secure trust in the high combing surrounding Marvel's cockpit to wedge me in place as I trolled for king salmon in a fishable but rough ocean. My movements felt awkward, tense, exhausting. My first day of the troll season took months of preparation. Over the winter, I found marvel for sale at the very bottom of Puget Sound. I knew immediately it was the boat, the one for me. The previous owner was more than happy to sell her. He showed me a few things, we worked out the finances, and I took off for Seattle. Fisherman's Terminal in Ballard was the best place to prepare for the upcoming season. I had a slip on Dock 6. I tried to understand all the equipment on the boat, the diesel engine, the most mysterious part. But I was a sponge, soaking up as much knowledge as I could. Fishermen offered their advice if I asked, but in the beginning, I hardly knew what to ask. The specific language of motors was foreign. Alternators, fuel injectors, 12 volts, transducer, transmission, what did it all mean? How was it supposed to work? And what was I going to do if, God forbid, anything broke? I took a couple of classes, navigation and diesel mechanics over the winter at a marine school in Ballard, but almost none of it made any sense to me. In spite of that, I kept going all spring, determined to make it to Sitka for the opener. It was no small feat that I had made it in time up the inside passage, Seattle to Sitka, without mishap. With all the lines rigged, I caught a modest amount of salmon the first day of the summer troll season, skipper of my own boat. I was happy for the catch. I didn't have a network of fishing partners yet, no one to radio and ask their advice. Where's the best place to anchor off the Cape? I would have asked had I known someone. I only had a chart and a weather report to go by. Hello all stations, hello all stations. Marine forecast for Sitka Sound, overnight and into tomorrow. Winds 20 knots from the southwest. Same as today, I thought, big sloppy seas. Gilmer Bay would be a better anchorage. I pored over the chart again. The route was fairly straight ahead. At the entrance of the bay, there were two potentially nasty rocks. The dimming light was nerve-wracking. Would those rocks be visible? Why had I waited so long to find an anchorage? Why didn't I ask someone where to anchor before I left town? Now, I had too many questions and not enough time before dark. I was on my own, headed towards the bay's entrance. Marvel rode nicely in the big seas, her stern lifting up each time a wave crested and broke under the hull, snapping us forward like a game of crack the whip. The ocean was toying with me, except for me, it wasn't a game. At the top of a wave, looking down into the trough, the bottom fell away. I spotted a surprise, a deadly surprise, a rock, a reef, a landmine in the sea, waiting in ambush to smash Marvel's hull. What is that? I gasped. I actually didn't see much of the rock itself. What I saw was white water and spray outlining its jagged shape. There shouldn't have been anything at the bottom of a wave, only deep, dark ocean water. A big Pacific swell whipped Marvel forward towards the killer rock. Instinct took hold. I turned the wheel hard to port, veering left, gripping the spokes of the old wooden wheel. I held my breath. Come on, Marvel, let's keep it together. We rode down the wave like a surfer, coming down the face at a diagonal, away from the rock that would have ended my fishing career, sunk my boat, and pulled me into the sea without a trace. After dropping anchor in Gilmer Bay, I unrolled the chart to see what I had missed, what had gone wrong. There it was, a tiny, dreaded star mark indicating a half-submerged rock, hidden at high tide, visible at low tide, and in big rolling seas, dangerous as hell. I misjudged my position. I was closer to land than I thought. The ocean currents flooding around Cape Edgecombe had swept Marvel inshore. This is when all the what-ifs avalanched in my mind. I fumed at myself for not knowing where I was, but mostly I felt ashamed that I'd made such a terrible, inept mistake. Reading a chart was the only skill I felt confident about, and I couldn't even do that. I collapsed into my bunk. I wanted to hide, forget where I was and what had just happened. Worst of all, I felt that I'd let my father down. He was the one who had taught me to read a chart. The next day, I played out the scene at the top of the wave over and over in my mind. Adrenaline and coffee got me through the first early dawn hours. During the morning bite, I immediately started to gaff salmon aboard. The rhythm of work calmed me down. I felt the roll of the boat and worked with it. The rough seas eased. Thoughts and old memories bubbled up. Then, all at once, I was a kid with my brother out in our skiff. Every summer growing up, I was the lookout, stationed in the bow of our little open motorboat, watching for kelp or logs or things that would tangle up in our propeller. All those joyful summers with sun and wind blowing in my hair, stationed in the bow of the skiff with a big orange life jacket tied under my chin, watching, looking for anything that shouldn't be there, prepared me for the moment on top of the wave. I knew to look out, look ahead, look across the bow, look for danger in the water, that white foamy spray I saw in the dim evening light. It was by the slimmest of chances I saw something that wasn't right. In the 12 years that I commercial fished in Alaska, I experienced nothing more dangerous than on that first day. Sharks, storms, breakdowns, all kinds of frightening and wondrous things alike. But that rock at the bottom of the wave was the scariest close call of my fishing career. I never told anyone about it until now, 40 years later. A bad memory to put in a box, lock up tight, hide somewhere in my house of shame, never to be spoken of. Alaska's riddled with stories of vessels that disappear, sinkings without maydays, boats that never make it back. If I say I was lucky, that is the truth. Double lucky. First to be there in the game, and second to survive it. Thank you. Oh, yeah, that was good. And I have another little short piece of prose from the end of my fishing career. On either side of my salmon season, I would crew on longline boats, black cod fishing out in the Gulf of Alaska. And I'll just take you on board opening day, or the day before opening day. 3 days before the spring black cod season, a group of storied halibut schooners waited dockside in Yakutat Harbor. Across the bay was a view to a picture-perfect peak, Mount St. Elias. It showed from sea level straight up to its 19,000-foot peak. Spectacular was an understatement. But the Gulf of Alaska weather rarely gave a full, unencumbered view. The boat I was working on, the All-Star, was tied up along one of the piers next to several Highline Seattle boats, the Northern, the Seymour, and the Republic. These legendary boats were the best of the best in the longline fleet. While comparing notes about our diesel stoves and what we made for breakfast, we, the cooks, decided to have a communal halibut potluck dinner. The halibut feed would be in the Seymour's large forecastle, a space that could accommodate all the crews waiting in Yakutat. A hook and line was dropped right off the dock into the pristine harbor. It only took a few minutes to catch a 30-pound halibut, enough for everyone to share. Each cook made their specialty: tartar sauce, garlic bread. My contribution was a big bowl of cabbage and apple coleslaw. The fish was so fresh, it had an iridescent sheen. Bite-sized pieces were cooked up in beer batter on an enormous diesel stove. We shared the fish, the first sacrificial fish of the season, and toasted to good fishing, success, and safety like a blessing of the fleet. At our gathering, I looked at each person around the large wooden table in the galley of this revered wooden boat. The forecastle ambiance spoke of the generations of fishermen who had lived and worked on board. I looked at each face, mostly bearded young men, strong, funny. The vitality was palpable. I was the only woman present, but it was not an issue. I had broken through a door that had always been shut to women. I was there by choice, by courage, by acceptance. I was part of this crew. If ever there was a moment that said fortune favors the brave, it was this moment. The day before the opening was the calm before the storm. We all knew what lay ahead. A long run out to sea, out to the edge of the continental shelf, where we would dare the ocean and take our chances to fish for a living. If we'd known what was to come, we might have stayed tied to the dock, but fishing openings weren't that way. If there was an opening, we went out to sea. Thank you.
Well, that's it. This one's in the tote. The Fisher Poetry Podcast is written and produced by Brad Wortman. The theme music for this episode is courtesy of Mark Allen Lovewell and Molly Knoll. If you'd like to appear on or have comments about the show, please send an email to thefisherpoetryarchive@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to haul the latest episodes into your net. The Fisher Poetry Podcast is available via our podcast host, Podbean, as well as Apple, YouTube, and Amazon. You can listen to our other podcast episodes, watch our YouTube videos, and join our community by going to thefisherpoetryarchive.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Come all young sailormen, listen to me. I'll sing you a song of the fish in the sea. Blow, ye winds, westerly, westerly blow. We're bound to the southward, so steady she goes.